Welcome to the Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. Let's get to it. Hello and welcome to the Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Judy Morgan. My guest today, Zach Bush, MD, is a renowned multidisciplinary physician of internal medicine, endocrinology, hospice care, that's a lot, an internationally recognized educator on the microbiome as it relates to human health, pet health, soil health, food systems, and a regenerative future. And this is something we should be talking about so much more. He founded Seraphic Group and the nonprofit Farmer's Footprint to develop root cause solutions for health. Zach, thank you very much for agreeing to be my guest today.
So glad to be with you, Doctor. Appreciate you.
So you have quite a few websites, and I was playing around in some of them before we went live. There's farmersfootprint.us, journeyofintrinsichealth.com, intelligenceofnature.com, and zachbushmd.com. There is some of the, obviously you don't ever sleep, and you're a type A personality who just has to be going all the time.
Fortunately, I'm a master sleeper. That's actually one of my secrets. I can sleep on planes. I can sleep on couches. I can sleep in farm fields, anywhere. So sleep is one of my superpowers, and I find
that would be an amazing superpower. It's one that I don't have, but you know, for our health, good rest is right up there, up there with good diet and all that kind of stuff. And so, in looking at the Farmer's Footprint website, very, very, very cool. So, what you're doing, there's a lot of interviews on there and a lot of people coming together, but it's really all about regenerative farming. Can you talk a little bit about what regenerative farming is, and then I'm going to let you in on what's been going on my farm, because it's been a really fun process. But what exactly is regenerative farming, and why should we care?
Yeah, this came into my world unexpectedly. I had been doing cancer research back at the University of Virginia in 2005 to 10 time period, doing chemotherapy research around nutrient density and using vitamin A compounds to treat cancer. And that got me into nutrition, which eventually got me into soil science. And regenerative agriculture is a description of a change in philosophy and behavior of the farmer or the gardener, where you stop focusing your attention on killing weeds and protecting your crop and producing at a certain number of bushels per acre. And you start actually instead concentrating on your co-creative capacity to be involved with the biodiversity and your soil systems and the macro flora and fauna on your land. And farmers are shocked, I think, when they find out that life can return to farms. Most of our farms in the world are now devoid of insects, devoid of earthworms. Like, it's just the basics that we grew up thinking were natural to the planet are literally lacking from 97% of the arable, farmable lands of the world now. This is not at all limited to the United States. And so our overdependence on plowing for hundreds of years as a method for removing biodiversity and getting just our cash crops into the ground. And then as chemical agriculture came on as a new solution for scaling that even greater in the 1950s, we really saw this advent of what at the time was called the Green Revolution, not realizing that we had just engineered humanity off the planet, basically. And so my science and research around human health took me right back to this core of soil health, because it turns out you cannot have multicellular creatures on the planet, whether it be earthworm, elephant, cow, or human, without the diversity of the soil system beneath our feet. And so as we have become the existential threat to our soil biodiversity, we've engineered the great extinction that we're now in. So regenerative agriculture is an extraordinarily simple process, really, of reconnecting human behavior at the soil level to foster biodiversity. And it's almost awe-inspiring that despite the kind of idiocy of human behavior the last couple hundred years of destroying our ecosystems that we so depend on for our own biology, we get to be co-creators in that solutioning if we so choose. And so while it's a devastating reality of what we've created here over the last 100 years or so in this extinction process, it's extraordinary that nature is so willing to welcome us back into the creative process with her and really change our future.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I'm a Jersey girl. I grew up in New Jersey,
The Garden
and
State.
the Garden State, yeah. And actually, some parts of it are. There's some parts that are definitely at the opposite end of the spectrum. But I grew up in the farming area of New Jersey, in southern New Jersey. And so, a lot of crops, a lot of farmers. And in undergrad, which is still in New Jersey, I dated a farmer. And so when I went off to veterinary school, I went to the University of Illinois. So it was my first time driving cross country. And when we got out to the Midwest, my boyfriend was with me, the farmer, and we're looking at it saying, "Oh, look at this soil. This soil is dark brown and rich and thick." And this was 45 years ago. The soil was totally different than what we were used to in Jersey, where it's basically sandy and just
Like,
depleted. And so and he's looking around and he's going, well, no wonder they're getting X number of bushels of corn off of their land, and I'm getting this paltry what I'm getting on my land. And interestingly, we just drove cross country again this year, and the soil looked totally different. It is now pale, dusty. That richness in 45 years has disappeared. And so we bought 23 acres in North Carolina a few years ago. And I had this grand scheme for being, after COVID, I was like, we're going to be self-sufficient. We can raise a cow and we can raise chickens, and I'm going to have this incredible garden. So I went crazy, put up a greenhouse, planted all my little seedlings. I had 700 plants, and I diligently put them in my garden. And then they grew, but I grew incredibly healthy weeds. Like the weeds that took over were awful. And the plants, even though they produced fruits and vegetables, they were pitiful. They were paltry. There were just, they weren't producing like they should. We didn't get very much. The animals and the insects would destroy them. So the next year I said, I don't know if this is worth it. So I went out and bought plants already grown instead of me doing my own. We brought in new soil to put in the garden, thinking, okay, well, all we have is clay. No wonder they can't grow. Brought in new soil that was supposed to be good soil, put the plants in, every one of them died. So these were nice, healthy, foot tall plants that I put in. I don't know what was in that soil. Everything died. So, here I am being self-sufficient. This is not going well.
this is common.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then I'm talking to a lot of my friends who are into regenerative farming and regenerative agriculture and all these things. And I'm like, you know what? We have to start from scratch. So this year we put in 2 40-foot long raised beds, and they're 4 feet wide and 40 feet long. And I planted herbs and flowers in them. I said, we're just going to see how this is going to go. And again, we brought in soil, supposed to be the best topsoil, whatever. And my husband did all this while I was away. And I came home and I said, this soil is horrible. We are not going to get anywhere with this soil. I'm not even going to put plants in here until we fix it. So we bought soil probiotics from Ireland. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that's where they were coming from, but we bought soil probiotics. We bought enough to do 10 acres, so we are going to do more of the farm. We bought earthworms, which, by the way, you can buy earthworms on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I went out and bought the nice bagged garden soil that's very rich and dark and put that in the top like 6 inches. You would not believe what is growing in these beds. So as of next year, the entire garden will be these raised beds with the enriched soil, with the earthworms, with the probiotics. And for the rest of the farm, we're trying to bring it back by having animals on it to, we're getting some manure mixed back in, and we're getting them walking on the soil.
That's right.
But it is shocking how terrible the soil is. And yeah, I go by farms where they're actually growing things. I'm like, how are they growing anything in this soil? This is horrible.
Yeah. So right now we're at 97% of Earth's soils are severely depleted or depleted of the critical nutrients for growing things. And so your experience is normal now on the planet. And so to get things to grow, people have to generally do one of two things. A, do what we've been doing for the last 100 years, which is put the soil on ICU care. So in the intensive care units that I worked in for all these years, we have this tendency to go in and say, the person's kidneys are shut down, liver shut down, heart's failing. So we're going to put them on bypass. We're going to pump their heart. We'll take over their lung function. I'll give them a bunch of IV nutrition, IV nutrients and drugs. And lo and behold, the person kind of stabilizes and it looks like they're kind of alive, and we get them out the door for a few weeks and then they're back in the ICU again. That's pretty much the condition of our soils today. We have our global soils on ICU care where we have to do intensive inputs into that soil in the form of chemical fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides, which are basically antibiotics. And so you're basically killing everything around the farm, trying to inject just a little bit of life necessary to grow the corn stalk to 6 feet of height or whatnot. So we have the whole world on ICU care right now. And what I learned as a medical doctor is an ICU has never created health, ever. And so ICU temporizes death, but it never creates health. And so we are basically kicking the can down the road on our global soil systems right now towards a dead planet. And the alternative, of course, is to stop doing what we do and give rest to the earth. And so what you are doing to that farm is brilliant. And say, you know what, we're not going to ask this farm to produce anything. We're going to start bringing animals in. We're going to start actually letting the weeds do their thing. So the weeds that you experienced were actually the best medicine for the farm. Weeds always show up on purpose, and they always are a gift to the farm. And so a weed is now referred to in regenerative agriculture as actually forbs instead of weeds. Forbs are seen as the nutrient reservoir restoration process. And so the weeds are rushing towards a piece of land to bring in nutrients that are needed there through a biologic process of transformation and transmutation. They also clean up the farm. They remove herbicide, pesticide residues. They balance out the chemical imbalance that happens when we do ICU level fertilizers and things like this. So weeds are highly on purpose. And what you'll find is if you let the weeds do their thing, 2-3 years, it'll be a different weed in there. The other ones that had come in first are gone because they did their work and they're no longer needed. And so as you start to work with nature instead of see her as against you, that land is going to recover very quickly. Getting animal diversity on the land, no brainer. As soon as you stop chemical farming and plowing, you'll find that the pollinators come back, the insects come back, the earthworms come back. Even within a single season, we can see this relief to the land bring back biodiversity. And so it's going to be a really exciting journey for you guys as you see that land restore. But I think for all of us, it's just a reminder that nature's never been against us. Nature is for us, or else we wouldn't have been here. And so we are from the imagination of nature. We are of nature. She is speaking through us as much as she is nurturing us. And so there's this huge opportunity for us just to realign our core identity as humanity. If you read the definition of nature in the Oxford English Dictionary, it says that it's everything on the earth, minerals, plants, animals, everything as opposed to humans or anything humans have made. And so we put ourselves in opposition in our definition of nature. And by doing that, we have this deep wound of abandonment. In this abandonment disorder, we have this belief of scarcity. And so this is really what's driving not just farming, but pharmaceutical medicine, industries like energy technologies, information technology. All these industries are built on scarcity models and built on the belief that nature is against us. And for this, our behaviors are kind of inherently have negative consequences to nature. Whereas what you're doing on your farm now is being witness to nature's recovery, really. And very quickly, I think you'll find that those raised beds are going to be outperformed by nature's recovery of her soils through her natural systems. And so you guys are experiencing like a petri dish form of gardening right now in your raised beds. But pretty soon, biology is going to show you what it can do in its extraordinary capacity for regeneration.
Well, the weeds are coming in and doing their thing. That is for darn sure. But it's fine because my animals could not survive if I had really lush pastures. My horses and donkeys would be so fat they wouldn't be able to walk. And what's really interesting is last year we had no pollinators. I couldn't get I couldn't see a bee for a mile. This year, I've got pollinators coming out my ears. I also planted a whole bunch of pollinator-friendly flowers and trees and plants, which has really, really helped. We need to take a break to hear from our sponsor. This is fascinating. I think this is one of those conversations I could have for about 6 hours, but we're not going to have that much time. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
As their trusted guardians, we are responsible for keeping our pets safe from harm. In today's world, that's getting harder than ever. Unfortunately, our pets are constantly exposed to damaging and virtually unavoidable toxins, like glyphosate. This exposure weakens their immune systems, causes inflammation, and disrupts the microbiome. One of the best things you can do to help protect your pet is to ensure their natural defenses are at their strongest. That's where Ion Gut Support for Pets can help. Ion Gut Support for Pets is proven to strengthen the gut lining within minutes, supporting your pet's innate ability to defend against toxins while promoting healthy digestion, immune function, and kidney health. We can't remove the world's harmful toxins, but we can help make living in it safer for our loved ones, especially the furry ones who entrust us with their care. Try Ion Gut Support for Pets today. Order now at intelligenceofnature.com and save 15% off your first order of Ion with the code Dr. Judy. Please note that naturally healthy pets may receive a commission on any orders placed with our code.
Respiratory diseases in dogs can cause significant distress. They include laryngeal paralysis, collapsing trachea, pulmonary fibrosis, chronic bronchitis, infectious disease, cancer, tumors, heart disease. Luckily, integrative veterinarian Dr. Judy Morgan has created a comprehensive short course that addresses common respiratory diseases and how to use traditional Chinese veterinary medicine food therapy, supplements, and hands-on care to ensure your pet retains a vibrant life. Podcast listeners can take advantage of 20% off by using the code PODCAST54 when ordering on drjudyu.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Naturally Healthy Pets podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Judy Morgan. I'm having a fascinating conversation today with Dr. Zach Bush. We're talking about regenerative farming, the role of soil health in the nutrients that are showing up in the plants that we are harvesting off of these nutrient depleted soils. So how does soil health play into pet nutrition?
Yeah. This is a critical, concept here as we start to follow the nutrient density from soils into multicellular life. And so multicellular life, whether it be the earthworm, the cow on the field, or your pet in your home, or your own body and your children at the dinner table, that nutrient density is going to translate very well across all of those different the courses of life there. And what we see, life is actually, at its core, what is life compared to physics, for example, what's biology versus physics? And the extraordinary answer to that is quite simple. It's actually a condensation of light energy. The brightest thing that nature does in physics is suns. And so those stars that are out in the universe, that's the brightest thing that physics can do. It's a nuclear fission fusion event. It creates an amazing amount of electromagnetic energy. It powers life. But what is life? Life requires a condensation of that light energy by 1,000-fold. So a single cell microorganism like a bacteria or an initial plankton in the ocean, the beginning of life on this earth required that light energy be concentrated at 1,000-fold that of nuclear fission and fusion. And what does that is chlorophyll in a plant, which is a mitochondria that lives inside of plants. It consolidates the light energy out of sunshine that's hitting the leaf and brings in this enormous amount of capacity for storage. And so the double carbon bonds of glucose and carbohydrates or fats are stored in the leaves of grasses and trees and whatever green plant you're looking at. And that condensation or concentration of light energy then allows for this multicellular, potential to come onto the planet. But to get from a single cell organism that's 1,000-fold brighter to multicellular life of an earthworm or human, you're again at 10x necessity in energy. So the mitochondria that innovated to live inside of multicellular organisms that we call animals, that mitochondrial metabolism was 10 times more effective than fermentation, which is how bacteria and fungi do their work. And so this innovation of respiratory energy on the planet, which led to this explosion of life, is necessary for us to understand if we're going to preserve multicellular life on the planet. And so your pets right now are kind of at ground zero of this disconnect between Earth and its vitality in the single cell organisms and this 10x leap to multicellular organisms like your cat, your dog, or your horse in the field. And so that concentration of light energy is absolutely necessary for life to persist. If we start to dim the lights on biology, we see chronic disease spring forward. And this has certainly hit humans in a huge way over the last, portion of my career. The last 30 years of my career has been, the demonstration of what happens when lights dim on human biology. But unfortunately, we're seeing our pets at 10 times more toxicity than the humans. And the reason is because of the pet food industry is really kind of the lowest common denominator of passage of nutrients from the soil to plants than to animals. And that's literally a result of the chemical residues that are in those foods. And so the chemical industry that has become our farming practices is pumping so much herbicide, pesticide, and chemical nutrients into those soils to generate genetically modified crops that actually cannot be eaten by humans. So a GMO corn cob has never ended up on your plate because it tastes terrible. It actually has no sweetness to it. It's extremely fibrous and doesn't have that bite off the cob kind of effect. So you've never eaten a corn cob of GMO corn. What you have consumed is the nutrient extraction from that corn. So we have to have processed food science to extract something that could be considered edible from our GMO crops, because by and large, they don't taste good. They've lost their nutrient density. They now are just commodities for the chemical marketplace. So they turn into high fructose corn syrup or canola oil or whatever it's going to be there. And so all of that chemistry that's coming out of our GMO foods is how humans will consume it. In animals, we are actually consolidating that stuff because we don't seem to care if the animals taste good food or not. We are feeding our cattle, our poultry, the turkeys and chickens in our hen houses, all the way to our pets. Absolutely poultry, nutrient sources that have no flavor, no nutrients, no medicine within that food anymore. And so for that, we're seeing this explosion of disease in our pets. And it is really a humanitarian crisis, if you can call it that, as to what we are doing to pets. And I've done this work not just in the homes, but really our entire protein industry, as we call it, which is really a crisis of spirit, I think, in our animal production around high intensity feedlots, chicken farms, and the like. And so in the backyard with your pets, this is manifesting as cancer. So dogs right now, there will be one case of cancer in every 1.6 dogs in the United States now, which means we're at nearly 100% of dogs will have cancer in their body by the time they live out their full lifespan. In contrast, we are killing our chickens by 6 to 8 weeks of age now. We butcher them for meat because they can't live any longer than that. We've already lost 1/3 of the flock by the time we harvest them at 6 to 8 weeks. And they've died of immune deficiencies, overwhelming bacterial infections, and infections out in the cattle lots. So my company's done very large-scale, double-blind, placebo-controlled nutrient delivery to cattle. And so our largest one was 12,000 cattle, 6-month process. And so I was out on these feedlots frequently. And when you're with 100,000 cattle, with 12 ranchers, it's just, you can't really calculate this much biology in one place. Like the body volume of 100,000 cattle is just something that I could have never imagined until having walked these places. And you can't actually walk inside the pens with the cattle because they're so autistic. They are so neurologically stressed that they act exactly like an extreme autistic child will in the clinic. They'll hit their heads against the fences. They'll charge anything. They're just so upset. They're so sensory overwhelmed by the stress in their bodies. And then this becomes your hamburger or your steak on the plate just a few weeks later. And so looking at the cumulative stress in our animals, whether it be the cattle that we end up on our plates or the pet food in our dog bowl, you can't even imagine, even me steeped in my science every day in my laboratory, I'm still just scratching the surface of my own human capacity to wrap my mind around the level of stress that we have put into the food system for our animals at large.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrendous. I look at the large pet food industry on a daily basis, and it is not a good thing, which is why we have this educational platform where we're trying to convince people that, maybe we should do this a little differently. So you have a product called Ion. And I know it is available for both humans and for animals, and we don't have much time left, so I want to make sure that we talk about that. What exactly is Ion, and what is its purpose?
Ion is a first of its kind category in the concept of supplements. In some ways, it's not even a supplement, but it's a communication network that is derived from soil systems. And so we are drawing the nutrients and active ingredients within Ion, which stands for intelligence of nature, from fossil soils. And so understanding that currently our global soils are completely destroyed in biodiversity, we've gone back in the fossil record 60 million years ago, which is pertinent because 55 million years ago we had the previous extinction event that took out the dinosaurs and 90% of life on Earth, which was due to a death of topsoils. And so here we are repeating 55 million years later, the same existential threat to life on Earth, which is death of topsoil. So we're going back back in time past two periods of extinction to find the deepest layers of topsoil records on the planet. And so at this time, 55, 60 million years ago, we had topsoil levels throughout much of the world that were 25 to 35 feet deep. Today, we're lucky to find 12 inches. And so these deep layers of fossil soils have a record of biodiversity that just haven't existed since. And so we're going back in time to extract not the microbes, which are long gone, but the metabolites of those microbes, the small little molecules left behind as they digested nutrients. And what we find in those is these small carbon molecules capable of communication. And so what happens in biology is you need many, many different layers of communication to successfully coordinate the complexity of a human cell, let alone its organism of a human body with 70 trillion cells. And so whether you're intracellular communication or cross-cellular communication in a single species, or more complex, the communication network between species, it requires many, many levels of technology. And the most base fundamental foundation for this communication is something called redox chemistry. You can picture this a lot like a liquid circuit board that allows information and electricity to travel through biologic systems instead of through a computer chip. But it's really the same process where you're allowing electrons and information to travel very quickly through biologic systems. That could be a soil system, it could be the gut inside the human, or it could be intracellularly in your liver or your blood-brain barrier or whatnot. And so this is what we have been able to extract from these fossil soils. And it has been fascinating to find out that humans don't make their own communication network. We rely on the soil network within our bodies, which isn't actually limited just to the gut. We used to think that the gut was the microbiome of the human experience, but we now know that the skin and actually every internal organ has its own organic garden. Even my brain has bacteria and fungi living within it to nurture its organic soil system. So what we've done with this supplement for pets and humans is to bring back this ancient, diverse communication network that humans have actually never touched before. We've only been here a couple 100,000 years. And so it's always fascinating for me to hand over a bottle to a dog or to a human because they're about to experience something as a mammal that's never been experienced before because we haven't had these levels of soil intelligence back 60 million years ago. And so it's been a really fascinating journey to watch cattle in the field or the pets or the humans experience this level of communication at the cellular level. Under the microscope in our laboratory every week for 15 years, we've been able to watch the ramifications, which is we have never believed that healing could happen at the rate that it does. Cells with unfettered access to information have literally an infinite amount of capacity for healing. They are constantly in a regeneration process. And we have been just shocked. In my laboratory, we have biologists and microbiologists and cellular geneticists that have been doing work for cumulative of a couple hundred years of scientific experience in our lab. And yet, routinely, we are seeing things never witnessed before because every petri dish that has ever understood the health of your animal or your human biology has been done in a sterile petri dish. So we only understand mammal biology in separation from our nature. we don't realize as physicians or veterinarians, I think, in our training, how potent nature is at regenerating life second by second, millisecond by millisecond. And so ION is your opportunity to connect your pet back to its full potential of cellular communication. And when it does that, you're going to see a puppification, is what I call it. That's a technical term for youthification of your dog. And so this is a bit of a warning, because we do have a lot of people that are like, I can't believe my dog just recovered, but my gosh, it's like back in its puppyhood and it's, running circles, and I'm doing 3 walks a day again. So that puppification happens in both humans and animals, which is that we get to find out that youth is not a chronological process. Youth is an expression of generative energy in the animal. And when you start putting ION, it's a liquid. You just pour a little bit into the food twice a day for the animal, or ideally take it a few times a day as a human. That liquid introduction into the gut microbiome is accelerating this generative effect, this repair and release of information as well as energy. It's the very first product that's ever been on the market that actually increases the amount of mitochondrial metabolism without any calories. And so we are able to see a 15 to 30% increase in energy output from the mitochondria without any caloric input, which means your body has become more efficient at utilizing the resources that are already there, which is really the opposite of what we've seen to the metabolism of humans over the last 50 years. 1980s, we saw the emergence of this explosion of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and the rest. That was the first signs of a collapse of metabolism, or our ability to take calories into light energy again. And so it's been a really interesting journey to watch that reverse under the microscope and see that, wow, mitochondria are absolutely ready to turn the lights back on for biology if it has enough information. So ION's been a very sobering, look at how we created the health crisis, and such a beautiful story of grace that nature would plant in her soils 60 million years ago, an antidote to the destruction of her soils today.
It is pretty cool stuff. And, turning on the mitochondria and giving them that energy and that communication ability is something that Dr. Ian Billinghurst talked about in his book, Point the Bone at Cancer. It took him 7 years to write it, but and it's a very long book and it's very hard to read. It's very sciencey. And I kept saying, I just want the punchline. Give me the punchline. But basically it was all about mitochondrial health and how damage to the mitochondria is what is causing this horrible outbreak of cancer and chronic disease. And so, this fits so perfectly with that. And you're obviously a brilliant mind that it never turns off, and you're always thinking and asking. And I am so appreciative for all the things that you're doing. I'm going to go spend a day going down the rabbit hole of your websites, because there's a lot of information on there and it's just really cool. And I think if we can all start to, realize just a little bit how our bodies and our health of ourselves and our pets are being damaged by the lack of good nutrients in our foods, the impact that these highly processed foods in the pet food industry and the human food industry has on our bodies and our health and our longevity. And I think that if more people can start thinking along the lines of what you're talking about, that we can see improvements in health across the board for all of our family members, including the little furry 4-footed ones that we all love so much. So thank you very much, Zach. I really love what you're doing. So for those who are listening, intelligenceofnature.com, farmersfootprint.us, journeyofintrinsichealth.com, where you can get coaches to help you through this health journey. And there's just some cool stuff in here. Zach, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Dr. Judy Morgan, you are a superhero among the pets that we live, and thank you for gardening us back into health here.
Working on it.
Thanks for listening to another great Naturally Healthy Pets episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for some helpful links. And if you enjoy the show, please be sure to follow and listen for free on your favorite podcast app. We value your feedback and would love to hear from you on how we're doing. Visit drjudymorgan.com for healthy product recommendations, comprehensive courses, upcoming events, and other fantastic resources. Until next time, keep giving your pet the vibrant life they deserve.
The purpose of this podcast is to educate and to inform. It is no substitute for professional care by a veterinarian, licensed nutritionist, or other qualified professional. You're encouraged to do your own research and should not rely on this information as professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Dr. Judy and her guests express their own views, experience, and conclusions. Dr. Judy Morgan's Naturally Healthy Pets neither endorses or opposes any particular view discussed here.